You're on mute, Debbie.
Okay, Chair, when you're ready, we are now streaming on YouTube. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to East Devon District Council virtual cabinet meeting today, 20th of January 2021. I will be the chair, Councillor Paul Arnott. Welcome to everyone watching the meeting via live stream. Everybody here today is taking part remotely, as well as being live streamed. The meeting's being recorded, so please bear this in mind. And may I remind you to be careful with your language. I'll also remind you that the code of conduct applies throughout this meeting. We also reserve the right to remove and disconnect any participant who is disrupting the meeting by whatever means. Please would you turn any telephone devices off or to silent. As the meeting is dependent on the internet and a power supply, in the event of a break to the internet or the power, please bear with us. We'll try and reconnect within 15 minutes. If not, we will have to adjourn the meeting and reconvene at a later date with details on the website. Please, can you make sure your mics are muted when you're not speaking to avoid any background noise levels? And as ever, very grateful if you could keep your points reasonably short and don't repeat those that have already been made. And of course, don't interrupt, please. If you wish to comment, please raise your electronic hand. And tonight, I believe that is yellow. All councillors have been sent the agenda for today's meeting, and any members of the public who'd like to view it can do so at eastdevon.gov.uk. So we'll now do a roll call of committee members here present. Can you please now unmute, Cabinet, your microphone, and when you hear your name, please confirm by saying present. Mute your microphone. Again,
Councillor,
Amanda, please.
Okay, Councillor Arnott.
Present.
Councillor Haywood.
Present. Thank you, Amanda.
Councillor Armstrong.
Present.
Councillor Bailey.
Present.
Councillor Jackson.
Present.
Councillor Young.
Present.
Councillor Ledger.
Present.
Councillor Loudon.
Present, Amanda.
Councillor Rickson.
Present.
And Councillor Rowland.
Present. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you. I can confirm that you are quorate this evening, Chair.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Agenda item 1 is public speaking, and we have one member of the public registered to speak this evening, and that is Jill Anderson at agenda item 7, the business support grant measures. So Jill, if you're happy to speak at that point, I'm happy to take it at that point. I can't see you, but I'm taking your silence as that being good for you as well. Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item 2 is the minutes of the previous meeting. If anyone has a comment on the sets of minutes from the 6th of January 2021, please could you raise your electronic hand. Now I know there is a comment and I've already written on behalf of Councillor Bloxham and the members of Cranbrook to ask for a change. Is there anybody here from Cranbrook who, well, probably we don't need to do that, do we? I think it's clear. No. Henry, could you just please read out what that change would be?
Yes, definitely. So it's in relation to minute 295, which is the Cranbrook Pavilion, and it relates to the reason that sits below the resolution. It's suggested that wording is added. Actually, I think that the wording that is proposed actually should replace the reason that is there. And the wording that has been suggested is that it has been accepted that Cranbrook Town Council are best placed to deliver the project and that they have appropriate resources to enable them to do so. I think you just include that sentence in place of what's there.
Thank you, Henry, very much. Cabinet, is that agreeable to all of you that we change those minutes to that effect? I'll take silence as agreement on this occasion, if that's okay. I can see a hand up, Councillor Rowland.
Thank you. I was simply going to move the amendment to the minutes.
Okay,
But,
that seems like a proper procedure. Can we have a seconder for that then, please?
Yes, second it, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ledger. And okay, I'll just take that as. Do we need to vote on that now?
I think given you've got to where you've got to in that procedure, I think if you just do a show of hands for all those in favour of the minutes as amended, please, I think would be wise.
Okay, thank you. I've got some strange reactions here.
So, Chair, if I may, then if everybody who is in favour, if you could just raise your yellow hand, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's at least 9, so that's clearly carried. Thank you.
And I've just managed to add mine as well as a pair of clapping hands. So it's another part of the jungle. Okay, lovely. Thank you very much for the minutes, and thank you, Councillor Bloxham and the Cranbrook 3 for suggesting those amendments. Agenda item 3 then is apologies, and I understand we have none unless there are any late ones coming through, Amanda?
No, no late apologies, Chair.
Okay. Agenda item 4 is declarations of interest, which we always do by a roll call. So back to you, Amanda, please, for that.
Thank you. Councillor Arnott.
None, thank you.
Councillor Haywood.
Yes, I have one, Amanda. In respect of late item 7, I'd like to declare a personal interest as I represent a charity that has claimed twice under the associated LRSG schemes mentioned in the report. And I have also been approached by businesses regarding ARG and LRSG applications. Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
None, thank you.
Councillor Bailey.
None, thank you.
Councillor Jackson.
Don't believe so, thank you.
Councillor Young.
None, thank you.
Councillor Ledger.
Thank you.
Councillor Loudon.
None, Amanda.
Councillor Rickson.
None, thank you.
And Councillor Rowland.
none, thanks.
Thank you.
Amanda, can I come back in briefly? I realise after Councillor Haywood has mentioned it, not sure if it's covering it, but I better do. We did do some bed and breakfast, and we were in receipt of a previous grant. I'm not sure if it's covered by this, but I'll just declare that, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Right, so we've got 2 late items or matters of urgency. We have the business support grant measures at item 7 and item 8, the mental health challenge for local authorities. But coming back to the original agenda, can we come to agenda item 6, please, which is the councillor password data breach. We're joined here today by Lawrence Whitlock and Robin Bailey from Strata. Thank you very much both for coming. And I'm very grateful to Mr. Gordon Lennox for having done a covering report for this as well. Henry, are you happy just to give a very, short intro, please? Thank you.
Yep, certainly. So members will be aware that beginning in November there was an issue with the visibility of some councillors' passwords on various devices. That was immediately raised as an area of concern, of course. It was immediately actioned, investigated by Strata. It was reported to the ICO as a potential data breach. Obviously, Strata carried on their investigation work. The Information Commissioner has closed the case. I can't quite remember the date now off the top of my head, but it was certainly before Christmas. That was closed down by the ICO. But obviously, Strata have carried on their investigation work, and on the back of that report has been circulated to members in advance. I've copied the executive summary in there. There is sensitive information that it's not appropriate to necessarily reveal more widely, hence why it's not been appended to the document. But my report sort of details some of the narrative around that, and also a stated expectation about ensuring that the measures, the identified measures, mitigation measures that need to be undertaken will be undertaken, and I'm committed to make sure that that happens. So hopefully that covers off the password breach. I've got no doubt that members will have some questions. Of course, there has been a briefing for members ahead of this, so that some of those perhaps more sensitive conversations can be aired. During the investigation, obviously, there was an issue raised around this spreadsheet and potential prioritisation of IT back in the May 19 or following the May 19 elections. That's been investigated, and hopefully I've covered that off in the report to the satisfaction of members around what that actually was. I ought to add, actually, since the briefing for members, I've had it reported to me about issue manager, which was the passwords that were on that report, that when that was initially set up, the system was configured so that the passwords had to be put in by the administrator. They have now updated their software such that members are able to reset their own passwords, because I know that's one of the areas of concern that flows from this. So within Issue Manager now, that spreadsheet is effectively now redundant, although there's a couple of checks that we need to do just to make sure that sort of the control aspect and whether administrators are notified of that, those changes. So we just got a couple of checks, but actually it looks like within Issue Manager, the sort of the enhanced requirements that members are after will sit as far as Issue Manager goes. And actually that spreadsheet will then be capable of being destroyed. Or deleted, I suppose, perhaps more accurately. But as I say, as data protection officer, I understand that there are issues regarding training and the need to make sure that we are acting appropriately. And I've said I've committed to that. Members may want to reflect whether there are further actions that are necessary. But in summary, Chair, that is my covering report.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Gordon-Lennox, for that, and indeed to you and Lawrence and Robin for running the session earlier today, where all members had the opportunity to ask about matters that naturally, very technical matters that can't be discussed in public, quite rightly. So I'd like to invite members from outside of the Cabinet Committee to raise their hand if they'd like to speak. And I see Councillor Paul Miller, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think it's very sad that this has happened, and I'm not going to be Captain Hindsight about this, because as soon as I became a councillor and received my councillor iPad, I actually, and I know you did as well, I made representations to Strata to say that I was really uncomfortable about the fact that I wasn't able to set or amend or change my password at the time. And I felt uncomfortable about other people having my password, and I think my fears were justified when we look at this report, where we can see there was a spreadsheet in Blackdown House with the passwords of all members on it. So for me, it's, especially as I was the one to discover the breach, I can only say I'm disappointed that despite members actually raising these concerns, and the fact that being able to set your own password, having multi-factor authentication is very standard practice across organisations. I'm afraid to say I'm disappointed that my and others' concerns were not acted on before this breach occurred. So that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Miller, can I think it's worth noting for this meeting, and can you just describe, for those of us who aren't particularly technically gifted, how you came to discover this and when? Yeah,
for the public's benefit, who might have read the story online, I guess this would be useful. I was on my Android phone on Office 365 in my emails, and I discovered another councillor's password visible on their profile, on their email. And I then checked my own profile, and my password was visible to me, and I worried that it would be visible to others. And then all 60 councillors' passwords were visible. So I reported it straight away. My worry, of course, remains, even though the report says it's a low risk, is that as councillors, we have extremely sensitive data, and private conversations within our email accounts. And as much as it was only other councillors that could see that information, you know, we're going through quite a nasty political times within the council, I think, at the moment, from recent conversations. And given breaches of other equalities laws by certain councillors, I wouldn't have been surprised if, had another councillor seen that password, they might have hacked into one of their colleagues' emails. So it was a risk, but I'm just glad that I reported it straight away, and I'm happy with the report that Strata have provided, that we received earlier. That was confidential for the right reasons. I think the lessons are learned. My only question, I guess, because I wasn't able to make the briefing earlier, and I think the public would want to know this: how quickly are we going to be able to implement the changes needed to ensure this never happens again, in terms of councillors being able to set our own passwords and having that multi-factor authentication in place? And I'd like to hear from Strata on that if possible.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Miller. I'll queue up, I think, Robbie Barlow in a minute for that. I would just like to place, on behalf to you for bringing this to our attention, and I would like that to be recorded in the minutes for today's meeting, please. Thank you, Councillor Miller. Robin, do you feel...
Sorry, excuse me, Chair.
Yes.
You froze just as you were asking me to note something. Could you repeat what it is you'd like me to note? Thank you.
Oh, blimey. Right. I would like to, on behalf of the council, thank Councillor Miller for bringing this crucial matter to our attention. And I think that's owed, because without that, we would still be vulnerable to the position we were in November, which was reacted to as fastly as humanly possible by Strata. So thank you very much, Councillor Miller. Yeah, so Robin, the question is really how quickly we can get to the point where we're making our own passwords, and we've got these extra elements. And what do you make of that?
Okay, without covering too much of the more detailed information, like many other organisations, the councils are moving to Office 365, not just for councillors in this case, because there's just a subset using Office 365, but it's going to be used by the councils. And as part of that project, which has been pushed ahead quite quickly, we're looking at from April onwards to start deploying Office 365 in a wider sense. It not means everybody's going to get it at that point, but the project is firing up at full speed at that point as we're working towards that, and some new licensing we're going through at the moment. And on that, from there onwards, and as I mentioned earlier on, we are looking at a period of a number of months, but we are talking probably 2 or 3 months, something like that, before these extra elements can be added. And that's what we are working through. It unfortunately isn't part of my area, but that's the information I've been given. So it's not going to happen before April because of the wider project that we need to actually fit in where we're going forwards with. But we're actually, part of that is to get 2-factor in place and to ensure that members can change their passwords. And we are looking naturally at other systems as well, where we'd also like to get those, not just for members. This shouldn't be a situation. We don't want to know the passwords for all these reasons we're talking about today. And therefore, thank you for bringing this up. But that's the plan. April onwards, we have a major Office 365 project, and that's where we can really get this sorted out.
Okay, thanks. Robin, one other just quick question, just so that I'm clear for the report. I suppose the risk began, was it roughly August, September 2019, when lots of us migrated back to our own laptops or Androids through Office 365? Okay, thank you. So that's kind of when the risk started. Thank you. Councillor Fabian King, please.
Thank you, Chair. I hope I can stay with you. My broadband has been dropping out a lot. I just wanted to remark on this report. I think the speed, before I do that, can I also add my thanks to Councillor Miller. I think his diligence and speed in picking this up was fantastic. The report sort of dwells on the fact that there wasn't I quote, the likelihood of passwords and emails being compromised by other councillors appears very low. That's a fairly gentle remark based on 30 days log on about 14 months of exposure. I'm bothered that the report generally concentrates on fixing the breach quickly, which is commendable, and on making good the procedures, which also is commendable. I do think that Strata provides a very good service all round and so on. And I say that as a preface because there's no room for pride here. This incident is a wake-up call. It's not so much to do with just the way things are done in-house. It's to do with how outside people can come into play. And indeed, it's a competitive atmosphere between the different groups in the council. So internally as well, there are any invitation to have a look over the wall is going to be very tempting, and people will, given the opportunity, they will have a peek to see what's going on. So I would just like to add to the conclusions of this report, which is that more than just looking at procedural issues, one needs to, which essentially are procedural issues. And there was one phrase used about more regularly reviewing security procedures, which is basically concentrating on self-examination. And also another phrase just used just now is acting appropriately. These are self-regulatory. We need to acknowledge that over a length of time, internal measures of this sort actually are rather incestuous. I do believe that we need to give room for an independent audit occasionally. And indeed, sometimes you can invite independent audits to be quite aggressive in order to stress test the security in ways in which the internal teams, as good as they are, will not quite be ready for, perhaps. That's what is to be found out. Other than that, I do recommend, it's mentioned a couple of times in the report, the concept of dual authentication or multi-authentication. The beauty of multi-authentication is that it doesn't get in the way so easily when you want to log on. It is one of the slickest ways of introducing further security. I do commend it. Thank you. I've said my piece. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. And as Cabinet, we'll try and find a way of absorbing your comments and turning them into action. Thank you. Is there anybody else from outside Cabinet who'd like to speak or comment? If not, I'll come to Councillor John Loudon, please.
Thank you, Chair. I want to follow on from Councillor King's comments, and I would have thought that we could be looking to the Devon Audit Partnership to look at bringing some external eyes onto Strata's processes, and we ourselves as EDDC could turn to SWAP for a similar set of external processes. And I think that would go some way to reassure Councillor King. And I think it would answer the question that is in the recommendation, which says whether or not we want further independent reassurance. I think both those sorts of processes would do that. The only thing I would say is that I would be content if we could change the word happy in the recommendation to something else, because I suspect none of us, including Robin and Lawrence, are happy at this point. But I get the drift of what is being conveyed in the recommendation. And Chair, I wonder if we can move to acceptance of the report.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Loudon. I wonder if you're able to come up with a form of words that might incorporate the recommendation to have a look at. Sorry to make you scratch your head. How we can include the idea of SWAP having a look at this process, or perhaps somebody else might be. In the meantime, broadcasting from the Northern Lights, Councillor Sarah Jackson.
I was just going to second the general proposal, but I'm going to wait until John comes back with his wording there.
Okay, right. Anybody else like to fill some dead air? Well, Councillor Loudon, how are you getting on, John?
Well, why, just looking at the recommendation, it says that Cabinet note the content of the report, and I think we say that we note the content of the report, yeah. And that we would invite Strata to approach or to ask DAP to maintain a regular review of their internal data processes, or a similar technical phrase, and that this council in turn asks SWAP to undertake similar for our internal data processes.
Okay, thanks.
It's very clunky. But
yeah, it is. It is.
Thank you, Councillor Arnott.
Okay, no, that was a good effort. Can I ask? Maybe we did have a bit of a chat about this beforehand. But can I ask the CEO, Mark Williams? That kind of works for us, doesn't it? I think what John's suggesting, but there's a note of caution, isn't there, as well here? We have to be careful. So your advice would be much valued, please.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Where we can work within the established assurance framework involving the Devon Audit Partnership or SWAP, I think should ensure that any issues are regularly reviewed, and any issues can then also be brought back either to Cabinet or to Audit and Governance, as the case may be.
Okay, and so the recommendation can include our recommendation that it goes to Devon Audit Partnership, and that this matter is looked at by Southwest Audit Partnership as well. That's correct, I think. Okay.
I can read out what I think it probably reads now, if you'd like, Chair.
Thank you, Henry.
So that the Cabinet note the content of the report and invite Strata to approach Devon Audit Partnership to maintain a regular review of the internal data processes, and East Devon District Council approaches SWAP to undertake similar assessment.
Okay. Right. Do we have Councillor Loudon proposing that? Can I look for a seconder, please? Councillor Rickson. Amanda, could you help us take a vote on that, please?
I'll do that, Chair, if you like. So, members of the Cabinet, please. That's all right, Chair. If you are in favour of that proposal, can you please raise your electronic hand now? And for the benefit of those watching online, the vote is now taking place. So I've got 9 votes, Chair. I'll just clear that. Do I have any votes against? Please raise your electronic hand. I'm assuming no from what I've seen so far. And no abstentions, so that's carried, Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Debbie, very much for that. In which case, we now go on to agenda item 7, the business support grant measures. And before we get started on that, I'd like to invite our public speaker, Jill Anderson, please, to come on in and talk to us. So over to you, Jill, when you're ready. Can anybody see Jill Anderson there? Officers, can you see Jill Anderson anywhere?
Yep, she's still
She is here.
I'm just seeing if I can force an unmute.
Okay, we can take your time.
Hello, is that unmuted?
Thank you, Jill. Yes, please. After you.
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak to you tonight on behalf of the Cranford Sports and Fitness Club. We made an application under the ARG Business Support Scheme for a grant, and that was under the Special Cases section back in December. I'm here tonight to ask for your consideration of our application. Along with the Council, we're acutely aware of the impact that the pandemic and resulting lockdowns are having on the physical, mental and emotional well-being of individuals and communities. We can contribute an important and cost-effective role in supporting our local communities, the NHS and many other local organisations and individuals to recover from this immensely challenging pandemic. We are a true independent community amateur sports club. We provide extensive support and indeed facilities to highly worthwhile community groups and activities such as Help for Heroes, Parkinson's support groups, disabled sport, etc. We provide jobs in the local community. We've got 16 employees and 20 fitness instructors. We use all local companies for our maintenance and business support. And our 1,200 members, that was pre-COVID, range in age from 6 months to 90 years of age. We're a community amateur sports club, that's cask status, and that guarantees that our fees are set so that groups and individuals are not disadvantaged, and it ensures the quality of the facilities. Governance and leadership are provided by an expert but very volunteer pro bono board of directors. Our club members are from local communities across East Devon, and our members use the club on average about 3 times a week, which for a good many fulfills most of their exercise and sporting needs. Traditionally, our membership is loyal and very long term. We offer a range of quality professionally delivered facilities, that's gym, multi-purpose indoor and outdoor courts, and a very shallow swimming pool. We've been overwhelmed by the support shown to the Cranford by the members and local businesses. Many have written to their local councillors, providing individual stories about how the club has helped them. We have an article going to Devon Live explaining how we've helped the community, and it includes details from one lady telling how we have helped to get through a very challenging cancer treatment. We are an independent club and we've exhausted the support available so far. So I'm here pleading with you, please could you find some way to help us get through this extremely challenging time to the end of the vaccination programme. So I just want to thank all the councillors. I also want to thank Amanda for letting me speak at just such short notice. To all the councillors who've supported us, and to Simon Jupp as well. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Jill, very much. We are listening. Can I come back just so that we understand the picture greater? I can quite see that you haven't got what you need. Have you managed to access any help at all so far? I mean, presumably furloughing isn't a thing for you, is it really? But have you managed to get any grants of any kind?
Yes, we have. We had the 25,000 from the government via EDDC. We had 2,000 for the second lockdown. We've not applied so far for the grant through the third lockdown because we didn't know if we were going to get something under ARG. Does that make sense? Because it looked as though if you had one, you couldn't have the other. We had 10,000 from Sport England in the first lockdown, so that's 35,000 already. And we have applied for another grant under Sport England now, which looks as though we'll get 6,000 if we're lucky, but we don't know yet. And we've also got a bounce back loan of 50,000, which we need to start repaying in May.
Well, honestly, congratulations for working to get that. We're aware that right over the other side of the district, the Flamingo Pool in Axminster is facing identical scenario. It is a complete lacuna at the moment in the provision from the government, and I'm sure we'll do our best to try and help as much as we can. Can I come to our finance portfolio head, Jack Rowland, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jill, for speaking this evening. I think we all recognise the importance of providing these facilities across the district, especially during the current crisis. I hope you may be aware that the Additional Restrictions Grant Panel, which is a cross-party panel, is actually meeting tomorrow morning. And this will be discussed at that panel meeting.
Thank you very much, Jack, for that. Can I just ask, beyond that, this is for everybody's information, really. Andy Wood, if you're happy to come up on this one, how do you see the schedule going ahead in terms of meetings for particular grants and so forth going ahead from sort of tomorrow onwards?
Yes, thank you, Chair. As has been mentioned, the first panel meeting, which relates to the 144 applications that were received from the call that ran between the 9th and the 23rd of December, is scheduled, I think, for 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Within the report, you'll see there's a suggested change to the function of that panel, because what has become clear is when we set up the initial call for applications, it wasn't in anticipation of there being protracted period of subsequent local and national restrictions. And we potentially, some businesses are facing a period that could potentially extend to 6 months of those restrictions, which would impact on their trade. And therefore, we need to transition to a different decision-making process to do that. I think Rob Murray, who's done all the work to assess the application so far, has suggested we have a kind of lock gate system at the moment. So those applications, the first one can only be paid when all of them have been assessed. So what we are suggesting in the report is the function of the panel changes such that it only considers special cases, as indeed the one that's been articulated tonight, or those applications which do not clearly align with the policy criteria that was agreed back in November. And that will allow, through officer delegation, specific applications which are clearly in accord with the policy criteria to be approved and paid in the most expeditious way possible. So we will schedule further panel meetings, but what I'm trying to explain is they will not be considering each and every application that's made under the additional restrictions grant scheme. That's the proposal.
Thank you very much for that, Andy. And I'm sorry, as ever, I've probably teed you up in such a way you may have stolen Libby Jarrett's thunder. I don't know, because Libby, you're due, aren't you, now to come on to present this report? So you've had your warm-up act. After you.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. Yeah, obviously this is a joint report by Andy and myself. The first part of the report, the report is really in 3 parts. The first part relates to the 2 new grant schemes that will support businesses through the national restrictions. The second part is, as Andy has set out, changes to the additional restrictions grant policy. And the third part, which is really contained in Appendix 1, is to provide an update to members on the different grant schemes that we now have running, supporting businesses from the November national restrictions through Tier 2, Tier 3, and now into the national restrictions again, starting on the 5th of January. So turning to recommendations 1 and 2, that's covered under section 2 and 3 of the report. Now we've moved into national restrictions, the local restriction support grant closed addendum scheme comes into being. This is a national government criteria-led scheme that supports businesses in the leisure, hospitality and non-essential retail sector. So this would allow the Cranford Sports Club to apply under this scheme. It is for those that are business rated, and the funding is going to reflect a 42-day payment period, and is support for businesses that provide in-person services. And the payment thresholds are set out in that report. In addition to the local restrictions support closed addendum scheme, the government have also brought in a business lockdown payment, CBLP, to provide a one-off top-up amount for those eligible under the LRSG closed addendum scheme of 4, 6 or 9,000, again linked to rateable value. And that will be paid in a single amount. So we're aiming to have that scheme live before the end of this month. and we are looking to try and simplify the claim process. So for those businesses that received a grant under the November restrictions, we will be contacting them directly, and there will be a shortened process for them in order to be able to access the grants that apply for the January into February restrictions. Obviously, if we continue in a national restrictions, then the government will provide us with payments that will be relative to the payment period that they set. So it could be 14 days, 28 days, or even a different period. Recommendation 1 is to approve the LRSG addendum, closed addendum scheme, and the closed business lockdown payment policies, which are available in the background links. Turning to the additional restrictions grant, which is contained within section 4 of the report, which Andy has talked through some of that. If you remember at the November Cabinet meeting, it was agreed the framework for how that funding would be deployed. We had just under 3 million of support through the ARC scheme. $1 million was to provide support during the November restrictions, $1 million to be ring-fenced for economic recovery, and the remainder was to be put into reserve to support businesses should we enter into further restrictions. Since agreeing that policy, some of the issues that Andy has highlighted about the need to streamline the administration process is contained in the report, so I won't touch on that again. Obviously, we've had quite a low level of take-up in the first round, so reflecting on that and the ability to widen out the scheme to cover further periods of restrictions. Also to highlight that the government have announced a further 594 million nationally for discretionary support. So looking at the funding formula, it's likely that we will receive an additional circa 1.5 million for the ARG scheme. So sort of taking into account those factors, we're proposing, as set out under 4.62, a widening of the policy, that the payment levels reflect the support that would be available to businesses through the main schemes, but are linked to 70%, and also to provide greater support through the special cases of one-off top-up grants or for those that weren't eligible under the main schemes. And we're suggesting in that table that that could be linked to the size of businesses. There's 4 sizes of business the government use, and allowing for top-up payments or one-off grants awarded of up to 100,000 under the special cases, which would be determined by the panel. So recommendation 3 of the report is to approve the changes to the operation of the ARG scheme as set out in the report. Recommendation 4 is for delegated authority to be given to the service lead for growth, development and prosperity in consultation with the leader, deputy leader, portfolio holder for finance and the section 151 officer to make changes to policy in order to keep it aligned with subsequent changes in government restrictions. Recommendation 5 is to bring forward the £925,680 from reserve to be deployed as discretionary grants, which we will need if we're going to widen out the scheme policy and to provide larger sums through the special cases. The 6th recommendation is in the event, or the likelihood is that we will probably move back into local restrictions and that we're able to launch the relevant schemes without needing to bring a report back to Cabinet. And as sort of highlighted at the beginning, Appendix 1 provides a breakdown of all the different schemes, the timelines for the periods that they relate to, and where we are in relation to the support that's been provided from that schemes to date. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Libby. I think it's worth reminding members who already know, but also particularly members of the public, that Libby's job is actually our service lead for revenues, benefits, and customer services. And Andy's job is a service lead for growth, development and prosperity. And they've spent a great deal of the last 6 to 8 months administering major government funds. So you know, it can't be said often enough. Thank you so much to both of you and to your teams for carrying this. It's deeply appreciated. Thank you. Okay, so having heard that report, can I come out of Cabinet first, please, to Councillor Steve Gazzard?
Thank you, Chair. There's a question to Libby, but first, thank you for all that you're doing. It's very much appreciated. Did I hear you say that some of the grant money will go to those that were unsuccessful in the first round, if you like, of deciding whether people were eligible for it? If that's the case, will you be contacting them, or do they have to come back to you?
Not, we weren't looking to change the eligibility. So obviously businesses can apply under the R scheme if they haven't already. It's unlikely that the ones that have been turned down would now be subsequently eligible. So yeah, I'm not quite sure what sort of types of businesses may be concerned about.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Brewster Sarum, please.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm speaking as one of the ward members in Littleham, and we've just heard the presentation from Jill about the Cranford Sports Club. And I think that one of the key messages that she delivered tonight was that she had exhausted support available so far. So I just want to make sure the panel puts that in the back of their mind, that they've exhausted support available. And I think we must also, as the leader has done, congratulate Libby and her team. I particularly like Libby's comments about simplifying the claims process, because I think everyone wants bureaucracy to be simplified and make it easier to make claims. So I think that's something very positive that Libby is recommending. And I think it's also very good to hear from Councillor Rowland that the panel is going to make different decision-making processes on how they work it out. So I think all in all, it's a very positive message tonight. And I thank you and hope that the panel will be able to give positive consideration to Cranford. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brewster Sarum. Can I stay out of Cabinet with Councillor Mike Allen, please?
Did I hear my name? I'm sorry.
You did, Councillor Allen. Sorry. Yes.
Wonderful. I think that looking at the additional restrictions grant proposed and the way it's to be handled, with another 1.5 million coming on top of the 925,000, clearly the government's been very concerned to make sure that businesses get supported. And I do welcome the comment that there should be higher levels of grant payment for businesses important to our local economy, because a lot of the local businesses have are a component part of a supply chain in the locality. So it's virtually going to be very difficult for some of them to grow again until the whole supply chain starts working again. And so I don't think we should be too restrictive with the additional restrictions grant. And the one thing that I'm concerned about, the ARG panel obviously keeps an eye on the whole balance of the way that these funds are dispersed. To delegate it entirely to officers and cabinet members would seem less advisable than to make sure that the ARG continues on. And I'm not sure exactly what's being proposed in the way of overview of this very important and very welcome grant. So perhaps Andy could just explain how the balance is proposed to work. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Andy, would you like to address Councillor Allen's point, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So currently, taking tomorrow morning as the way it operates currently, all applications are reported for consultation purposes through to that panel prior to any formal decisions and payment being made. So that the first point that payment can be made is immediately after the panel meeting. Obviously, the drawback with that is it will then be, from the 23rd of December to just checking tomorrow's date, but that tomorrow's date until
21st, Andy.
Thank you. Until the payments can be made, and I think the concern that has been registered certainly is that now we are in a sustained period of both local and national restrictions. Business is suffering and needs the funds to flow as quickly as possible, and that's certainly been a message I think that's come down from the Secretary of State for Business, to all local authorities. Therefore, within the report, in order to expedite the payments, the proposal is I'm not saying that all applications will not be reported to the panel, but what we are seeking is delegation to ensure that where applications are clearly in accordance with the terms of the policy, they can be approved and paid and then reported to the panel itself, rather than having to wait for a panel meeting before that payment can be made. That is what we're putting forward. The exception to that is that where specific applications are clearly either not fully compliant with the policy or have come in under the special cases clause that Libby has articulated. I hope that makes sense, Chair.
Thank you, Andy, very much.
Chair, if I may just come back.
Yeah.
My concern in every council grant situation I've been involved in since 1995, we've always had some kind of monitoring control and a cap on the very large grants. And if somebody is asking for up to £100,000, to leave that completely in officer decision seems unusual. And I'm wondering if that's really what you want. Thank you.
Okay, Andy, what would you like to say about that?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, just to be absolutely clear. So the special cases that are set out up to the £100,000 in Libby's in the report, absolutely, those special cases will come to the panel before any decision is made. It is only those smaller grants that are clearly compliant with the terms of the policy that we're asking for delegation to move through the process quicker, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Councillor Allen, as well. Councillor Paul Miller, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to bring us back to the issue of the Cranford Sports Club, because I can see the public speaker, who I thought spoke really well, Jill Anderson, earlier, is still with us. Whilst I'm not the ward member for Litlam, I did get a call from Councillor Desarum earlier. It was a bit of a surprise to speak on this item with him, which I'm happy to do, some cross-party cooperation. And I have never been contacted by as many individuals in my ward about a single issue since the Cranford Sports Club in number of emails. I've had a large number of emails from members of the Cranford Sports Club, which would suggest to me that the Cranford's problems are quite significant, but it also shows how valued they are in the local community. And so I hope the Cranford Club's application is looked on with favour. But also I think it's worth pointing out that there are going to be lots of other leisure centres across the district, which are particularly struggling at the moment. And I understand, Leader, that you were at Team Devon meeting earlier with other councillors across Devon, and the plight of the leisure industry was mentioned specifically. So I don't know whether you'll have a chance to speak more about that. But in terms of this grant, I just hope that leisure facilities are given due weight. That's all I can say. And thanks very much.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Miller. I'll briefly comment on that then. Yes, earlier today, I and Mark, our CEO, were at a Team Devon meeting. Team Devon is a meeting of all the district council leaders and chaired by county, who, for the purposes of those ones, generate a lot of extremely useful information for us, particularly at the moment, obviously, about coronavirus, from testing to vaccines through to economy. And I forwarded you all, I think it was the testing report and the vaccine report earlier, the economy report earlier today. The final item that came up, which was one of the most passionately spoken about at the Team Devon meeting, was when Councillor Hart asked us kindly, okay, how is it for you and your leisure services in your districts? And it was pretty much a litany of woes. I mean, I obviously won't say what everybody individually said, but by and large, everybody is in serious trouble. And what was interesting was even one authority who still manages its leisure in-house still had big problems, because this is exactly the time of year where everybody renews their subscription. As you know, New Year's resolutions and all the rest of it, nobody has for them. So their problems have been kind of delayed. They're running behind ours. So on Friday, we have a meeting that is just Devon district leaders, which is just the district, not county. And I expect this to be a major agenda item there, as we try to see how we can cooperate in a response and try and seek help from further help from government. And I think we do, it's clear now, it's kind of been triggered, isn't it, by this next lockdown, which, sadly, clearly is going on until well after Easter, I think. But thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Ian Hall, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good evening, especially to our public speaker, Ms. Jill Anderson. Declaring interest on the chairman of the Club North Sports Centre in Axminster. That's a charity that provides education through sport. We have had actually grants received. It is incredibly tough out there with leisure, no doubt about it. And as you quite rightly said, Chair, the Flamingo Pool is just another thread in the east of the area which is struggling. But I think there is a very urgent need for us to move ahead with the East Devon leisure strategy as soon as possible, because what I'm finding in my role as chair is, yes, we haven't able to unlock the facility, but it is the impact, what it's having on the users, which actually leads into the next agenda item around mental health. So it is a very, very serious situation out there. And I absolutely understand where the public speaker is coming from. It's incredibly difficult for everybody in the leisure and comes without any business at the moment. Thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Hall. And again, for the benefit of the members of the public, we have a recently established LED, formerly Leisure East Devon, LED monitoring forum that's running now, chaired by Councillor Sam Hawkins. And out of that, very recently was a decision for us to look again at our whole leisure strategy. So that is in hand. And I agree with Councillor Hall. In the current circumstances, we need to get on. We need to get on with that. Councillor Maddie Chapman, please.
Thank you, Leader. I too have had lots of emails from the Cranford. I would like to point out, I have had a lot from injured servicemen that are no longer servicing, but they need their physical exercise. Being as it's winter and they've lost limbs, they can't go out. They have a good programme at the Cranford, and they are very worried that they're going to lose their programme. And I really feel that armed forces, we need to support those that have been injured. There's also a group of young children that have mental health, various problems that benefit from the group help that they get at the Cranford. I would just like to point this out. It's not just about getting on your bike or going for a swim. It is bringing people in that desperately need the help for physical or mental problems. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chapman. I absolutely agree. Can I come next into Cabinet now, please? Councillor Paul Haywood.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Jill for her eloquence on behalf of the Cranford Club, and for your own reminder about the Flamingo Pool in Axminster, and for Councillor Hall and Councillor Moulding on behalf of Crocombe Lawns. They're all suffering significant financial hardship, and we'll help where we can. To just touch on Councillor Chapman's reference specifically to ex-servicemen, perhaps through you, Chair, and through Jill, perhaps an approach to Help the Heroes. They offer a sports recovery programme and grants, and that may well be something you could approach if there is a specific need, and a specific need within Exmouth for that. Secondly, I'd like to ask that Cabinet's heartfelt thanks are recorded in the minutes to Libby and Andy and their team for everything they've done and their efforts to understand, frankly, often vague and ambiguous guidance from central government as to what exactly needs to be done. Throughout that, they have created workable and equitable payment schemes that you see in front of you now. The complexity of the rules that they are abiding by, and in often cases, schemes changing from day to day, can't be overstated. You know, we started off with one scheme, here we are now, I think, with 9 or 10 schemes, and that's all thanks to their team. They're doing a fantastic job. In response to Councillor Allen, all I would say is that if the panel needs to meet every week, then so be it. I hope I speak for all panel members, and I chair the panel, when I assure councillors and the public that we will be tireless in our efforts to ensure that money is allocated and people are supported, businesses are supported. And I hope all councillors, including those members on the opposition ranks, will support that panel in their work. It's a cross-panel group. So finally, all I would, through you, Chair, would like to add a 7th recommendation to what's in front of you. And I'm more than happy, once I finish speaking, to email this to the officers in attendance. And that 7th recommendation is this: to encourage our constituency MPs to strenuously and vigorously lobby the Chancellor of the Exchequer to provide financial support for those in the excluded group, apologies, I won't do the exclamation marks, who the current policies of the schemes are not assisting. And that's by virtue of the constraints laid down by central government. So I'll form a body of words and email that across now, but essentially that's a 7th recommendation, that we continue to task our constituency MPs to lobby vigorously. I mean, proper lobbying, not just sort of, you know, the occasional tweet, proper lobbying, so that this group, who are deeply in need, some of whom have not had any income for nigh on a year, are assisted. Those persons are outside of the remit that we legally are allowed to assist, and they are suffering. I get calls every day from people. I had one this morning from someone in tears because just through circumstances their business will go, and they're in deep hardship. You know, we can signpost individuals to schemes that East Devon operates for hardship and fuel poverty, food poverty. Each town in East Devon has means, but none of these people conceived as business people that they would need to go to food banks. They would need to approach food supply companies and apply for loans. There's a huge amount of pride here, and people don't like doing it, but they've got no option because they have no income. So I think our MPs need to understand the hardship that's out there, and if they don't, we need to encourage them to understand it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Haywood. I think your 7th recommendation ended about 3 minutes ago with the word assist full stop, I think. So maybe that's...
I was expected to make a note of all of that.
So if you can email over to Henry that first chunk. So for consideration later, I'll be very grateful. Thank you. Councillor, so we're in Cabinet now. Councillor Jess Bailey, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Libby and Andy, very much for the report. I just really have one comment, and I just wondered if Libby could kindly say a few words about the low level of take-up on the ARC, I think you mentioned. Is that right? And just be interested to know any comments, please.
Yes, that was an odd one, Jess, wasn't it? Libby, are you happy to pick that up?
Yes, I am, Chair. That's
you.
fine. I think probably the timing, just before Christmas, a lot of these businesses would have been trading. The level of grant payments probably weren't significant enough. They needed to, businesses in the retail, leisure and hospitality were probably trying to take advantage of the Christmas trade. And I think because we'd gone from the national restrictions November, and we'd moved into tier 2 and tier 3, and by that point other grant schemes were being announced with the wet-led pub payment and the closed scheme and the open scheme that were to cover for tier 2 and tier 3. I think all of those things added together probably, and the timing probably contributed to a lower level. I think with widening out the scheme to provide support for a wider period, and together with the new grants available under the national restrictions that are with the additional payment, I think we may see a higher take-up of support being needed. Okay.
Thank you.
Is that's okay for you, Councillor Bailey, is it? Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Jack Rowland, please.
Thank you. I also wanted to echo as well the congratulations to Libby and Andy. They must have felt like they've been doing the hokey cokey for about the last few months. All these titles of these different schemes, I mean, all the titles just trip off the tongue, don't they? And when we've been moving from tier 3, tier 2 to tier 3 to lockdown, just the multitude of different grants that are available. Even in my weekly finance meetings, so I've struggled to keep up with all the complexities of these. So I have got my head around all these now, to be congratulated. And what I wanted to do, also hearing Councillor Haywood's 7th recommendation, is I'm not sure if he did move the 6 recommendations, but I'd like to formally move the 6 and also endorse the 7th one that he included as well.
Thank you, Councillor Rowland. Very welcome. Councillor Marianne Rickson, please.
I was about to do the same, so if that needs to be seconded, then that's what I would like to do.
Thank you, Councillor Rickson. Henry, have you, through the miracle of the internet, got a clearer idea of recommendation 7 yet from Councillor Haywood?
Yes, I've got that, Chair. So it reads, so the additional recommendation 7 reading to encourage our constituency MPs to strenuously and vigorously lobby the Chancellor of the Exchequer to provide meaningful and urgent support for those in the excluded group who are unable to make applications under our current grant policies due to central government constraints. So it's as written with that additional recommendation.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Councillor Haywood and to Mr Gordon Lennox. So those have been moved on block 1 to 7. Debbie, can we take a vote on that, please?
Yep, of course, Chair. So members of the Cabinet, could you please raise your electronic hand if you are in support of those 7 recommendations? So that's 9 votes for. That's actually unanimous, Chair, because Councillor Ledger has had to leave to attend another meeting. So that's carried. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Can I just make sure, I'm sure it is, that for the minutes, our thanks have been noted to Libby and Andy and their team. Everybody's said it, but just don't want that to be forgotten. Thank you very much. Right, we now come to agenda item 8. The mental health challenge for local authorities. And I'd like to invite our strategic lead for housing, health and the environment, John Golding, to discuss the report he has very kindly prepared. John, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this report considers the merits of signing up to the Local Authority Mental Health Challenge and explores ways of enhancing our welfare support to staff and supporting members' positive mental health. The report also picks up on earlier discussions we've had and demonstrates our awareness of the importance of good mental health. There is, I would suggest, a heightened awareness of the need to maintain good physical and mental health as a result of the pandemic, as we all face restrictions and new pressures. Our recently published statement of intent gives a commitment to positive mental health as part of our health and wellbeing programme, and our public health strategy picks up on this theme, and the headlines are shown in Annex 2 of the report from the public health strategy. I would suggest that we approach this matter from a strong place, particularly with respect to staff welfare, where we have evolved a comprehensive Happy Healthy Here programme, and the details of that programme are set out in Annex 1 of the report. The Local Authority Mental Health Challenge sets out some good practice and a framework for driving this agenda forward. We've looked at what some other councils are doing and considered good practice. And one example is shown in the report, which is the Braintree experience, and there's details of that in Annex 3 of the report. The Mental Health Challenge gives a structure for the member champion role and signals a commitment to developing our staff and member welfare activities. I've reproduced the key commitments of the challenge in the report. And to achieve that, we will need to increase our capacity and our skill set so that we can deliver on the expectations of the mental health challenge, if indeed we sign up to that, if that's what's agreed this evening, and so that we can enhance our programme of health-related activities for members and staff. To further develop our approach, I'm advocating an in-house coaching type supporting, facilitating role. And in the report, I highlight that important distinction between that coaching type role on mental health as opposed to the medical stroke clinical role, which I'm not suggesting that we embark upon. That's quite a specialist area. And we're not competent in that area. But what I am suggesting is a kind of preventative role, for want of a better description. There is a good opportunity to expand some of our staff wellbeing activities to members. And indeed, if the report is agreed, I think it'd probably be useful if I work with the member champion for mental health to survey members to get a better idea of what members' needs are, what their preferences are, and how we best roll out a programme of support and signposting for members. As a caring council, it's good to have an opportunity to raise the profile of the importance of mental health, and this report proposes a way forward for us to do that. I would anticipate, if the report is supported, that we do incrementally develop the work, building on the framework that we've got of our existing activities and our commitment to supporting health and wellbeing. And over time, I would suggest that we would also be able to start to offer some more support to the community and work with our partners and contractors. Although initially the report does focus on an internal focus at first, but you'll have seen in the mental health challenge there is a commitment to helping the community improve its mental health. Happy to answer any questions, Chair, and pick up on any issues arising from the report. Thank you.
Thank you, John, very much. Can I ask you, just for the understanding of all members, just to confirm the genesis of this? So this goes back to overview in September, is that right?
From memory, Chair, it goes back to a council motion, I think back in September, October time.
Okay, thank you. And then you produced the first draft of a report, which was ready in what, roughly November, from memory, something like that.
Yeah, as you say, we undertook quite a bit of research following the council motion. We looked at good practice. Councillor Miller and myself had made contact with Braintree Council, so it took a while to develop some of the thinking and produce a report, which was then subsequently refined through some internal conversations over the last few months.
Okay, thank you, John. It's a very it's a critical subject, and on a subject as sensitive and key as this, Rome isn't built in a day. And thank you for all the thought you've put into it. I think we first looked at it informally from memory in something like late November, and then we wanted some amendments to the report. That's right, John, isn't it? Yeah. And then those have come through now in January. We brought this forward as soon as we can. It might have been possible. Well, we may have left it until the February Cabinet meeting, but that seemed like a daft idea because we had today's meeting. So I hope that clears up some doubts on the part of members. Right, thank you very much. Just coming outside of Cabinet, I've got Councillor Steve Gazzard, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I say thank you to John Golden for the excellent report, and also give my thanks to Councillor Miller for his input on this. As you rightly say, we've been discussing this for quite a few months, and you're absolutely right. We need to get it right. And I'm really pleased that we're hopefully going to move this forward. As councillors, obviously, we are responsible for the welfare of all the staff that we take under our umbrella. And without our staff being able to do their jobs, correctly, we can't, as a council, function. But I was really interested in the point that John mentioned about members, i.e. councillors. Because of this situation we find ourselves in at the moment, a lot of us are dealing with more horrific caseloads, and it does obviously impact on us as councillors, and we don't realise it. So I think it's really important, the point that John has raised, is that it will also include support for members as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gazzard. Councillor Fred Cagle, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to ask Mr. Golding a few questions. And first of all, if he can answer them, then that would be great. If not, then I'm sure somebody else may be able to. Could I ask Mr. Golding, how many staff does EDDC currently have on establishment at this time, and how many are on sick leave registered currently?
Can we just, what we'll do, Councillor Cagle, if we can, we need to email questions like that in advance of meetings so we can establish the facts. So if you have a second question, that please go ahead.
I do. I have read the report and I've looked at the various annexes, and I'm very pleased to see that in Annex 1 we're talking that East Devon District Council have a very good, happy, healthy here policy, and within that is mentioned occupational health. And unfortunately, I have got a subsidiary question about occupational health provider. Do we contract one, and how much do we pay for that service?
Okay, I think if it's okay, Councillor Cagle, that the payment, let's do that by email. But I think, can we? I'm pretty certain is externally contracted. But John, are you able to confirm that, please?
Yeah, that's my understanding. Where there is a need to refer to occupational health, we commission that in case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cagle, anything else?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just because obviously I didn't see the report until quite late, so I wasn't able to put those questions in advance, but I would still be interested to know those answers to those questions if possible.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Councillor Haywood. So I'm sure we'll make a note of those and get an answer to you in the next day. Thank you very much. Councillor Sarah Jackson, please.
I'm actually within Cabinet, and I think Tony Woodward has his hand up at the moment.
Right, Sarah. Also, you might need to do a bit of work on your microphone before you do come back as well. It's a bit blippy still. Our member champion for mental health, Councillor Tony Woodward, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'm, as a member champion, I very much welcome the report. I think it's an excellent report, and thank you for what John Golding has been saying. I endorse everything that he said just now. So I don't need to repeat what's in the report. Just with regard to each element of the recommendation, I think the first element is if we do sign up, then that will give us a structure within which to work and allow us access to resources, which would be very helpful in pushing the mental health agenda forward. On recommendation 2, of course, I will do my very best to have regard to the guidelines. And there are clear guidelines in the challenge information, so I'll be pursuing that. And as to the lead officer, again, that'd be very helpful for me as a member champion to have a contact, someone to liaise with within the council and officers, and have one point of contact with which to relate. I think that'd be very important to give that sort of synergy between officers and council members to pursue the plans which we have. And as with recommendation, well, it's one recommendation, element 4, it will really help us to push forward public health, which includes mental and physical health. So I'd urge the Cabinet to accept and approve the whole recommendation, each of the 5 elements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Woodward. And I'm just absolutely delighted that you're there as a member champion for mental health. This was an idea that came, I see Councillor Hall will come up in a minute. It was absolutely cross-party. There was agreement on the need for this quite, when it first came up. And so I'm really thrilled we've got somebody there in that position. Well, actually, Councillor Ian Hall, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, John, for his report. And obviously, Councillor Woodward, we're all here to help each other here on this subject. And I'm really, really pleased to see this coming forward. Who wouldn't welcome this area, which is so important? On the last agenda item, we was talking about physical. This one's about mental health support. I'm one of the people who obviously works full time. I know there's many of us who do work full time. I've got a team of 71. Working is as its challenges as it is, but working through the pandemic has been incredibly challenging for one and all, because you're dealing with your own things, plus trying to do the job the best as you possibly can. There are individual anxieties, and we're all trying to dodge the bullet of COVID-19 at every turn. But we've got to be here, primarily in my view, first and foremost, looking through the lens of our officers who are trying to deliver the services to most vulnerable and most in need people within our district. We must ensure that we lessen the load wherever we can of our officers, and that goes from the chief executive all the way to the people who are delivering the services on the front line day in, day out. This is a very good start. This is something what can be built upon. We can't do anything about yesterday, but we can certainly do something about tomorrow. When it comes on to us as members, we as members, we've also got our own trials and tribulations going on. And I dare say, if we're honest, when we're looking in the mirror, we have wobbles. But it's again really good that we can hopefully have that support going forward. I haven't declared yet, Chair, but I think I need to declare a Devon County Councillor. I'm also a mental health champion. I'm also the vice chair of ARC, which is a mental health charity in Axminster. Some fantastic work going on. But this can't be worked as a singular. We can have a mental health champion and a mental health officer. But it's absolutely imperative that this is across the spectrum. We're actually embracing this approach. Because if you haven't got a good mental health, you can forget everything else. And therefore, when we're coming up to important decisions as members, we've got to be ensured that we're in a good place so that we can approach any given subject. So when I actually look at this leadership, and leadership being that as members and as the leadership group and you as the cabinet tonight, we've got to ensure that we can really, really think long and hard how we can best make use of this. But we need to be doing this for our appropriate leads and our portfolio holders and our mental health champion going forward. So it is a good start, and I do welcome it, because there's been a lot of talk around mental health of late across the world, not only our country. But thank you very much for indulgence.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hall, and I would wish to endorse every word you said. And I think there are two things I draw from it. It should be self-evident that the welfare of officers is at the front of everybody's mind, and it is. And I also think, and I really welcome what you've said in being so honest. Members are, and I'm very aware of this, a lot contact me, and not just from my group. They're really under strain. They really are. And I find, you know, as a wizened 59-year-old beaten up old man, I just kind of crack on. But a lot of people can't. And at the moment, there are people who are, you know, we have a different profile of counsellors now. We have people who right now, tomorrow, will be being counsellors and home educating. It's extraordinarily stressful. And what I would love to see is that this initiative helps bring a harmony between members and officers. I think it's really important. I think it would help towards a mutual understanding. Anyway, that's enough from me, isn't it? Councillor Mike Allen, please.
Thank you for letting me talk. My original interest in this whole field arose from the work that I did when I was HR officer in South Somerset District Council, and Lawrence, who was one of the directors there, wrote a PhD thesis on the whole subject of stress inside councils, and there's not a lot of published work on that, although Unison did do an excellent survey in 2014 which showed that 84% of local council staff suffered stress. So you can imagine when I heard that Andrew Ennis told me that in the scrutiny joint meeting that there was no risk analysis done in this area, I immediately started asking questions, because not only have we had the stresses of actually huge amounts of workload, but also, as you, Chair, just mentioned, the whole issue of remote working and home working. And the whole lot has thrown the stress level risks for our council employees, let alone everybody else, into very sharp relief. And I would ask that your recommendations include a thorough risk analysis of the particular problems that are being faced by staff if it's not already been done inside the HR department. I mean, frankly, at the scrutiny meeting, I was trying to discover who was in the role.
Okay, Councillor Allen, I'm going to have to put you on mute. Please don't go there. And if you go there, I will have to ask officers to put you on mute for legal reasons. Actually,
I'm
officers, can you put Councillor Allen on mute? I'm really sorry. Can you do that immediately, Democratic Services? You have just referred. Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry, Councillor Allen. It did look as if you were going back to scrutiny last week, and that is not a suitable matter for discussion today for obvious reasons. Sorry to cut you off. I've never done it before. Please don't try.
Not acceptable.
Please don't try.
Going there. That is unacceptable. That's bullying.
Chair, through yourself, can I ask if Councillor Allen goes against your instruction to mute him, can he be removed from this meeting, please? He's disrupting the meeting. You're muted, Chair.
Chair, I think you're muted if you're speaking.
May I suggest, as Vice Chair, that we have a brief adjournment for a few minutes until we can establish whether the Chair, Councillor Arnott, is having technical difficulties. Thank you.
Yep.
Oh, I've been muted. Somebody's muted me. So
apologies, Chair.
okay.
Are you back with
us? In which case I couldn't understand Councillor Allen's face, because I had just said if what he is saying is that he's not going to further the discussion of last Thursday, I'm very happy for him to continue to talk for another minute. So sorry, Councillor Allen, I don't think you heard that. Are you able to do that?
Yeah, well, I'd be grateful, because I wasn't going in the direction you thought.
Okay.
And it's quite unfortunate that this is the second time I've been prejudged. All I'm trying to do is to ask you to include the whole aspect of risk analysis, and to explain who could possibly do it with regard to the stress levels of our staff. I don't think that is entirely in any way controversial.
No, that absolutely isn't. And it sounded as if you might be going in a different direction. So can I just come back to John? What's your understanding? I know this is an HR matter really, but how do we calibrate the ongoing stress levels of staff, so to speak? Is there an annual, well, I suppose when staff leave, there should be exit interviews, but hopefully before that, there's some kind of ongoing appraisal?
So, Chair, I probably help more than John on this, if it helps.
Yes, sorry. Thank you, Mark. Yeah,
we do regular staff attitude surveys, and the last one we did was shortly after the first lockdown, I believe, and certainly that gave rise to a number of actions on the part of managers, particularly to assist with regard to things. I'm not totally cited on the difference between a risk analysis and our regular staff attitude survey, so I'd happily have a further conversation with Councillor Allen about that in terms of what further that might reveal. But as I say, it's a matter that we've regularly done staff attitude surveys because it's the key part of understanding the issues and the pressures and the stresses that staff are experiencing.
Thank you very much for that, Mark. I suppose that does raise the interesting question, doesn't it? When did we last do a member stress survey? So maybe that'll come out of this piece of work. So Councillor Maddie Chapman, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I think mental health is very, very serious in the workplace. It's also serious for us as members, with lots of things going on, as everyone is well aware. I welcome the idea of we have a member champion and having an officer. I'm just wondering, is it a consultation post of someone who is trained? We don't want to get into a situation, I would hope, where we would take on an officer who would advise something to a member of staff or maybe a member, and find out that the council is liable. So if we take someone on, is it a friend to chat to guide, and what liability insurance, if we need any, should we have in place? You know, I'm taking this from my own workplace, which I've since retired, obviously, being very, very careful not to tell someone, well, you should do this and should do that, when actually they should perhaps do something else. So it is a minefield. I am well aware of this, but having someone to talk to and discuss things with is one thing. Asking someone what you should do is completely different. Thank you, Leader.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Chapman, very much. I think what will be useful is if we all remember at this stage that what we need to do is look at those recommendations. So if members please can focus on the 1 to 5, those are the points we need to think about. I think it's accepted. We understand that the need for mental health help is there. Can I come to Councillor Brewster-Sarum, please?
Thank you, Chair. I recognise, as other members have said already this evening, that it is quite a very serious matter. And I think the key to this lies in the basis of the report that we've got in front of us at para 1.11 and para 1.12. I think personally, as a member, having read that, I think that sets out the case as to why we should have a member champion. And I think that Councillor Woodward will be a very splendid champion. And I think that it is the right way to go. And I do commend you for taking such positive action, given the COVID crisis that we currently face. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Brewster-Sarum, thank you so much. I haven't said it yet tonight. I don't know what the rest of you feel. I sat there with my daughter, slightly in tears, watching a female vice president coming in and then Joe Biden. And it does show you that that change can be affected. It can be affected. And I hope that this report will help in that, and that will be reflected in the tone of our debate. Councillor Philip Skinner, please.
Thank you, Chair. And I think this discussion is going very, very well as far as everybody is in agreement, and I don't think we need to elaborate on that too more. Having a councillor member champion, fantastic idea, and having an officer in mental health is also another good idea. Could I just sort of get some sort of qualification of where members are thinking of going? This is a new post, I think, to be established, is from what I'm gathering from the report and from what people are saying. It's a very difficult role to focus on just one particular element, and although mental health is a big issue, and I would probably understand as well as anybody in my lifetime in what's in where I've been, and that is I think I'd like to have some qualification on what is the role going to do, and how does that overlap with our existing HR role? And could I have a bit more around that, please, about what people are thinking?
Absolutely, Councillor Skinner, thank you. Obviously there's a job description there on page 40 of the agenda. And some more description on 40 going over to 51. But John, can you help Councillor Skinner with the current thinking on that, please?
Yeah, hopefully, Chair. So in the section 3, I think, of the report, I've given some options, as it were, because there are a number of ways of approaching this. And bearing in mind what Councillor Chapman has just said, I do recognise the risks, if you like, for straying into territory that is more medical than preventative, which I mentioned earlier. So one of the ways we can approach this is having a role in the council similar to our public health projects officer, which is a role that kind of campaigns, facilitates, runs sessions for staff, and those have been largely geared around physical health and those sorts of things in our public health strategy. So my thinking was that we would have somebody in the council that would concentrate on the mental health side of the work that's contained in our kind of health and well-being agenda that we already have, and build upon and drive forward. So it's about having more capacity, but as the way I see it is very much a educational, coaching, preventing mental ill health type role.
Thank you very much, John. Councillor Benning,
could I just ask? Could I just elaborate a little bit on that, please? Just
if it's a question, yes. If it's a statement, no.
No. Yeah, and it's not a statement. No, it's not a statement. I'm trying to qualify in my own mind, because I've got experience of this. I'm trying to qualify in my own mind. And the question where I was getting to, and I understand what John was saying. I absolutely get that. But it's the overlap between what is an HR function and role that is in place at the moment, because you would imagine that would be the role of an HR officer, and the new role that you're going to bring in. And I can understand the strains and stresses between now and the COVID and all of that. But what I'm trying to get to is actually really define what this role is going to be, because it's all very well going on and doing all this. It all sounds very rose-tinted glasses and all the rest of it. The point is, it's a really serious subject, leader, and it's really serious that we really understand what role we're trying to create and how that role fits in within the council going forward, and that's what I'm trying to get to.
Understood. I think my understanding is, and John, please correct me if I'm wrong, that the analogy is with our current public health officer role. Is that fair to say, John?
Yeah, I think that's how I've framed it in the report, but I do make reference to the fact that, well, firstly, we have a really good programme for staff at the moment, this Happy Healthy Here programme. We have limited resources and budgets to drive that forward. So we've got a part-time resource that actually sits in HR. What this report is saying is that with some more capacity and some more resource, we can develop that programme even further and extend it to members. And for me at the moment, that's where there seems to be a particular gap, is the member area, because as I say, staff have been pretty well looked after for some time. You can always do more, but the gap for me is in the member area.
Thank you very much. Councillor Benningham, please.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, can I say that I am in full support of the recommendations and the intent behind them. Can I just add, Chair, that I'm very concerned with some of the behaviours of councillors, and there's evidence that we've all seen over the last couple of days. My personal opinion is that it really doesn't help if we insult each other via email, and this is to all groups, and all councillors. I don't see any benefit in it. I don't see any benefit in questioning officers via email. And if anyone does that, why would we want to include everyone in their circulation? It really doesn't help anybody's stress levels when we do this. And if someone is going through a mentally stressful time, receiving these emails just doesn't help at all. So my request is, Chair, if you don't mind, that all of us think long and hard as of tomorrow about sending insulting emails to each other. I don't think that the public would be impressed by it at all if they knew this was happening. Thank you, Chair.
I mean, Councillor Ingham, thank you so much for saying that. We all get drawn in sometimes, and some people treat emails in a sort of professional way. It's very factual. And then there are others, I think, for whom electronic media is the Twitter and Instagram thing. And I think you're absolutely right. I think style and self-restraint gets lost, and I agree with you. It's very damaging. It really is. We just need to
Vice Chair, are you able to step in? I think our chair's experiencing some technical difficulties again.
Of course I can.
Thank you.
May I call Councillor Allen to speak next? If you could keep your point short, Councillor Allen, as you've already spoken once, and we do have other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haywood. I simply wanted to explain that the Health and Safety Executive is the source of stress risk assessment, and it's a legal requirement on the council to have a stress risk assessment. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. I'm sure...
I mean, having said that, could we please consider my suggestion that we add that to the recommendations for today? It's a legal requirement.
Hello, sorry about that. It's as many people have said, it doesn't seem to like the rain, does it? I've no idea if anybody caught me agreeing very heartily with everything Councillor Ingham said before I was lost. But and Councillor Allen, I think I can work out what was just said from there as well. Right, so looking at the list that we've got at the moment, I think we're back into Cabinet. And Councillor Jess Bailey, please.
Thank you very much. Yes, so I am obviously very supportive of the principle about providing mental health support. I think I would just say just a few things. I'm conscious of the comments that Simon Davey has made about our finances and the fact that it's not budgeted for. I'm clearer now that it's kind of member focused, but I'm not sure exactly what the membership want from this role and the extent to which they will engage with it. I'm not sure. And I know that John's has referred to a survey. So I'm just sorry, there's stuff going on in the background. So I'm just a little bit unclear on that. And I'm not entirely clear where the gaps are within our officer programme. I understand that we can always do more. Of course we can, and we must always try to, but I'm not quite clear on that. So there's a slight contrast for me between, say, this role and the role for the mental health officer for the housing officer team. But I am supportive, but I'm just raising just a few points. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. I think you're absolutely right. And in a sense, there's still some evolution to go on. I think what we're trying to do tonight is to say, yeah, let's go for this. And if it doesn't look like it's going to work, prior to a recruitment, we can think again. Councillor Sarah Jackson, please.
Thank you, Linda. I'd like to make an additional recommendation, and I'll explain why. But first, can I just ask for some advice from Henry? I appreciate that as a member of Cabinet, I couldn't sit on overview, but at the time that this came through to overview, I was a member of overview. So I just want to check whether there's any conflict with me proposing or voting on this subject, I'm also aware that it's my portfolio is highlighted within the report as one that it falls under.
No, Councillor, I think that's fine. I think that's fine, unless you feel particularly that you're conflicted or incapable of taking a fair decision. Otherwise, I think it's fine.
Sarah, do you want to come back on that then?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you, Henry. And it is a subject of particular interest of mine. Yeah, I'm really supportive of this, as I was back when I was on overview. I think looking at the recommendations on the table, there's actually a bit of a gap, and this sort of feeds in, I think, to some of the things that some of my colleagues have mentioned, including something that Jess Bailey has just picked up on as well. And I think the additional recommendation I'd like to add to the others goes something along the lines of this, that the new officer act as a liaison between the council and other authorities and bodies, including the member champion and the new officer within the housing team, to ensure that they have the most current and up-to-date advice to signpost members and officers should members of the public require assistance through them. Because I think often, certainly over the last few months, I've noticed that a lot of the casework that I have come in, which isn't necessarily residents within the East Devon housing, there's sort of everything and anything where there's casework involved. Sometimes they, off the back of the conversations that I end up having, they express severe anxieties around not knowing where to go for support with mental health issues they're having. And it can be quite difficult with this very fast evolving situation where there's new support systems springing up here, there and everywhere, to establish actually what's available to them at that moment in time. And so I praise the recommendation to take on an additional officer, and I think if they have the ability to act as that liaison with other authorities like the County Council, the NHS, and other charitable organisations, just to see what's available, that would really benefit all members and all officers throughout the council. And I hope that my colleagues in Cabinet will consider that additional.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson, do you have the capacity to email that over to Democratic Services?
Yeah, I'll pop it over now.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that. Councillor Megan Armstrong, please.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I thought Councillor Haywood was before me.
Not on my one. I've got hands in every colour and every order. So over to you, please.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you. Yeah, well, I'm afraid I had a long. Well, I've had a back-to-back meeting day today, so I haven't really had chat. And I got the report. I read the report at just before midnight last night because I'd had a long meeting last night as well. So I started drawing up my queries on the back of not really having perhaps read it as fully as I should, and some of the things I might say now may have already been covered by previous speakers, so I'll just preempt it.
Okay, no worries, no worries. Yeah. Thank you.
So first of all, I just want to state that I do fully support anything that supports the mental health and well-being of everyone. And I do agree with recommendations 1, 2 and 4. But I do have some concerns about recommendations 3 and 5. The two main issues I have are about, firstly, evidence of need, and secondly, the funding issue, because it's not budgeted for. Now, if I can just go back to the first bit, the evidence of need on point 1. And this is a question I've been writing down on and off all day between meetings. and we may already have the answer to this. Who is the target audience for this new employee? Is it for members or is it for staff? Because I thought I'd read in the report that it could be either or and both possibly, but I may have misread that. How would this role differ from the member champion? What would be his or her brief? What evidence do we have that such a paid role is needed and for whom? As indicated in the various documents from John Golding, it's quite clear there's already a vast array of staff support in place by the council. So please forgive me if I've, if that is not what it's for, if it's not for staff support. But I just wanted to emphasise that there is an employee assistance programme for staff, which has more in-depth support for every employee, including one-to-one counselling. So we've got a whole range of things for staff, which I feel are more than adequate, as some people have already said. Is this a strategic recommendation or is it a reactionary recommendation? And how will the success of this role be measured? So they're just some of the questions. And as I say, some of them may not be necessary now, but I just wanted to get them out there just in case they haven't been covered. So at the moment, I'm not currently convinced that such an appointment...
Thanks, Megan. I mean, the reports, can I just say, Megan, quickly? Megan, very quickly.
Yes, I haven't finished yet, though.
This report... Oh, no, I just wanted to help with something with your list.
Sorry, go on, yeah.
Which is obviously the report... Do you remember you didn't particularly like the report back in November? But
it was, yes, it's the updated one I'd not read.
They're very, very similar. So I think you've had, a couple of months to ask those questions, but perhaps if you can email them to John.
No, well, can I just carry on, please?
Can I just carry on? It's a list for him to react to tonight.
Yeah. So I'm not currently convinced that such an appointment will achieve anything over and above what's currently being offered to staff. If it's intended for members, I would suggest that this is not necessarily required because we haven't got the evidence of need. Where is the evidence of need that it's needed for members? And I'm sure most people in this virtual room will shout at me now and say, well, of course there's evidence of need. We're all tearing our hair out. But you know what I'm like. I'm the sort of person who needs evidence of need before we make a strategic commitment, especially when it costs money. I refer also to the Braintree District Council report, which I had looked at before, which we've all received, which identifies that much of our own staff programme covers most of the areas which they also cover. But my second point refers to the funding for this post, the £50,000, which is not budgeted for, as this is indicated in the financial implications in the report. This would be an ongoing annual cost for a permanent staff member, which differs significantly from a one-off amount. These ongoing costs will contribute to the medium-term financial plan deficit. We have many other long-standing and important needs in the district which have not been included in the MTFP simply because we can't afford them. So that all sounds pretty negative, I understand that, but I've got a proposal and I see what people think. I just wonder, and I think this was discussed at a previous discussion we had, that the member champion role continues and a review of his work and evidence of need for a paid role is done after a period of about 6 months, something like that, up to a year, but probably 6 months would do it. If it is then felt that there is an evidence need for such a role, then address it again at that point. So that's what I recommend. I'm just not 100% sure at this time for all 5 recommendations. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. Okay,
fair enough. Right, so sorry, just coming back in again. Councillor Paul Haywood, please.
Thank you, Chair. The impact and stress of COVID has been a wake-up call in the UK, I believe, about the issue of workplace and relationship, home and children's mental health. I heartily support the recommendations that are in front of you on this report, including Councillor Jackson's additional recommendation, which I look forward to hearing in its refined form. But I'd suggest an amendment to number 5 to add that the estimated £50,000, and this covers part of what Councillor Armstrong was alluding to, comes from the £700,000 that the central government has specifically given this local authority to mitigate against the effects of COVID-19, which the challenges to the mental health of our staff and members and communities is certainly high on that list, if not top of that list. I'd go further and suggest that support and advice and counselling for our staff and members would also trickle down, a bit like the economic trickle down, and would allow them to share that information and that guidance with their colleagues, their friends, their neighbours, their communities, their families, and even perhaps their children. So the wide-reaching effects of this proposal are profound, and I think that I do unfortunately disagree with Councillor Allen, with Councillor Armstrong, and so I'd like to. I'm not sure. My apologies. Has it been moved? If it's been moved, my apologies. If it hasn't, I'd like to propose that we move it with that amendment to number 5 and including Councillor Jackson's number 6. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Haywood. Do we have a seconder for that, out of interest anywhere? Can you shout? Because I can't. Oh, Councillor Jackson's hand is up. Okay, Councillor. Okay, well, Councillor Jackson, your hand, your blue hand is now up. Are you coming back?
Yeah, please. I've taken on board some of the questions that Councillor Armstrong's mentioned there. And a question really for John Golding, who I think is still here, but he's not on my screen.
Yeah, he's there, very much so.
Obviously, we are in fairly uncharted territory, and surveys of our members' mental wealth. Feedback. Our members' mental health, and also sort of like a health check on our officers' mental health in this current climate, are obviously going to be really, really useful. But exactly what that support might then progress into and evolve into may very well develop over time. So I just wonder whether what scope there is around how we staff this, whether this is a single role or more junior roles that can then develop over time as the need becomes clearer. And because I have absolutely no doubt at all there is a need, it's just what that need might end up being, I suspect will adjust and change with time as the whole situation that we find ourselves in changes too.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. I wonder if what might be a good idea is just, can I come to Simon quickly, where we are for budget setting for next year, and would there in theory be the capacity to include this role?
Yeah, Chair. I've laid out in the financial implications in the report that, I mean, it will be a council decision because it is a request for a budget. There is one-off funds available that haven't been allocated as yet in next year's budget. So if members consider this is a high priority, they could allocate against that one-off funds that we've been given from government of 700,000. There are other calls that we know are coming against that, but there is still capacity to meet a £50,000 budget if that is council's priority. The additional point I was making in my commentary was that would cover next year's budget, but clearly that will be adding then a post and a cost every year going forward, and you have a medium-term financial plan gap to find in terms of funding, and then that adds £50,000 to that savings that you've got to find somewhere else going forward.
So I suppose looking at that, John, and that's how I understood it as well. Looking at that, John, what what Megan wants really is for this to be explored. Well, an appointment of that role could help us explore it, and we know we can cover it for the first year. That would work, presumably, because we'd appoint somebody for a year. We don't have to appoint them for 25 years, and then we'd get all the feedback we needed on what the need is. Does that make sense?
Yes, Chair, we can do that, and I've deliberately framed the recommendation 3 rather, such that we appoint a lead officer, and then for me it's very clear that if we are to sign up to the mental health challenge, we do need to do more than we currently do, and that requires some additional capacity. And one of the early things I think I suggested in the presentation that we could do via the member champion is to survey members and see what the members' needs are, what their requirements are, just so that we're very clear and we frame our future interventions or assistance for members around that piece of work.
Okay, thank you, John. Councillor Jack Rowland, please.
Thanks. Picking up on what Simon Davies said, I mean, perhaps there's an option to say the recruitment of this person could be on a 1-year fixed term contract to start off with, because that would give the ability to see the actual impact of that role and how it helps. And then if at the end of that fixed term contract, towards the end of it, if it was felt it was a permanent need that has been established, then we could consider how we're going to finance a permanent employee from then on, and perhaps be in a position to offer the role to the fixed term contracts if they wish to apply for it.
Thank you, Jack. I mean, does that fit within our employment policy, Simon and or John? Can we do that? Can we offer people a job on a 1-year fixed term?
Yeah, you can go out to advertise on that basis, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, hopefully that would deal with that one then. Okay, I quite want to go to a vote if we can quite soon. We've been here a couple of hours, but Councillor Jess Bailey, please.
Sorry, yes, that would definitely be my preference, to have a fixed term contract, because I'm concerned about the kind of, the rolling impact. I prefer to see how it went rather than rolling on. Thank you.
No, I think we'd all agree with that. Thank you. Councillor Armstrong, please.
Chair, yeah, just to come back quickly. So, yeah, I'd be happy with that, with a 1-year fixed term contract, just to try it out. I feel more, yeah, I feel we're not sort of letting the horses run out and just go on and on forever and ever, and you know what I mean?
Absolutely. No, no, thank you, Megan.
So, but the other thing is, I just wanted to confirm that it is, so this role is, and I suppose I'm asking this of John really through you, that it is, we're just looking at this person for members. We're not looking to do this for staff, are we? Have I understood that correctly now?
I think it's definitely a role across both, isn't it, John?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Sorry, John, carry on. Sorry.
Yeah, no, the intention, hopefully the report conveys that. It's very much a member and officer appointment in order to drive forward the agenda and to meet the terms of the mental health challenge.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I'm half asleep, obviously, and I just have not.
No, don't worry. Don't worry. So in the new Joe Biden era, I'm going to generously come back out of cabinet to Councillor Ian Hall. I can see his hand is still up there. Ian, do you want to come in?
Yeah, only briefly, Chair. There's been some questions from Councillor Armstrong, which are important questions. And I'm just thinking, as there's been some amendments to the recommendations, to be sure that we get this right, because that's very, very important, because we've had it said, is it for the members, is it for the officers? As I said in my preamble, is my primary function is to further support the staff, but evidence-based as it is, we possibly could look at this if we could have a one agenda overview meeting at the council meeting, which was cancelled yesterday, to discuss this further. Would that not be an option going forward?
Yeah, that's a matter for the chair of overview. Absolutely. Thank you, Ian. Right. So, we've got, in the spirit of universal suffrage, Councillor Eileen Ragg, please.
Yeah, I've suffered a long time. Could I just say, who would draw up the specification for the job? Mental health officer is a pretty loose term. It could cover a multitude of things. So I think we need to be specific on that. I think I'm looking towards John Golding on this. Who would draw up the job specification, and how would it be decided what that specification would be? Thank you.
Chair, if I may answer that. So the role is outlined, but it is only outlined in the report. I would draw that up with HR colleagues' advice. That's what I did for the mental health support officer that the HRA is funded. Between us, we constructed a job description, and then that will go through our job evaluation process, so it's properly costed, if you like, in terms of the value of the job. We do that collectively.
Brilliant. Thanks, John, very much. So I don't know where everybody else's day started. Mine started at the doctor's at 9 o'clock, and I haven't basically left this room since. So in the interest of my ongoing, and now, Henry, have you managed to capture all of the recommendations? We had an extra one, didn't we, from Councillor Jackson? We've got the idea of a 1-year post, and I think Councillor Haywood added a bit of wording as well. But Henry, do you think you've got that?
Yeah, so I think recommendation 5 is amended to say that sorry, just let me flip between the various screens. The request is made to council for a budget to cover a 1-year fixed term appointment, with the 50,000 being taken from the 700,000 COVID fund. And then the additional wording from Councillor Jackson as an additional recommendation she's kindly sent through is that the new officer acts as a liaison between the council and other authorities and outside bodies concerned with mental health, as well as the new mental health officer within the housing team and the mental health member champion, to ensure that they have the most current and up-to-date advice to assist members and officers with signposting should members of the public approach them for assistance.
Fantastic. Right, Cabinet, I think that's clear. Debbie, can you help us go to a vote, please?
Of course, Chair. So members of the Cabinet, could you please raise your electronic hand if you're in support of those proposals 1 to 6, please? Chair, I have 8-4. If I just lower the hands now, can I check if anyone is against, please? I don't think there is. No, so Chair, that is carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All members and all officers today, thank you so much for your thoughts and your contributions and the manner in which you made them this evening. Really grateful. That brings our meeting to an end, and I'd like to thank members of the public as well who've been watching online for taking part. And can I just remind all those present that we're still being recorded and live, and until then your comments will be live to the public. Thank you. Good night.